Hello, this is Janet from the West End Library at Laurelton, PA, and we're back for the monthly book review. I know. I didn't do one in November. I am sorry, but I am back now. Anyway, the book that I want to do for this month is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I had no clue and no expectations prior to starting this book and had no idea where the storyline would even take the reader. I did know that it was essentially about a young girl and a murder was involved. How it came to be and the result of the events, of course, I had to discover on my own while reading it. I was very pleasantly surprised upon reading Where the Crawdads Sing. It's beautifully written. Its descriptions not only of the marsh area of North Carolina, but also the intricate pictures one can imagine regarding the wildlife being described. And even though this is a one-hit wonder for this author, I truly believe that she should consider writing another book. The story basically revolves around a young girl whose family lived in the marshes, the father being an alcoholic, and the gal is abandoned by the mother of five who simply walks out the door and one day never looks back. Kaya, the main character, waits and waits for her mother's return, but it never happens. Kaya is the youngest of her siblings, and one by one the older ones leave. They have lived a life never knowing when their father was coming home and if he's going to be drunk or if he hadn't had any money to contribute to the home. Kaya's mother had scraped by for years and had been the victim of abuse by her father on a regular basis. Kaya and her brother Jody are left at the shack, as they referred to it and as it was, that they had all shared. But shortly after, Jody leaves as well, and it's just Kaya at the shack with their father. Kaya spends a lot of time in the marshes, the bayous, and at one point even takes her father's boat out. At one point when her father comes home from being away, Kaya asks him if he would please teach her how to fish. They have a few months together where her father was kind and taught her things until a letter arrived from her mother. It had been addressed to Kaya, but her father took it, and because she could not read, she didn't know what the letter said. After that, her father began drinking again and eventually disappeared. Kaya was left totally on her own to figure out how to do things. Finding foods, growing in the marshes, she began to forage out her own life. The local school truant officer came to take her to school, something Kaya had never experienced before. And because of her age, they put her in second grade. She didn't know her letters, her numbers, and she was made so much fun of that one and only day she went to school, she never returned. Not too much later, while out on her father's boat, she spied a friend of her brother Jody. His name was Tate. It took a while, but Tate soon earned Kaya's trust by leaving her feathers of different birds. Tate eventually began stopping at her shack and began teaching her how to read. He taught her basic math, and the first Christmas without any family, he bought her some paints. With the paints, she began to draw and paint pictures of the different birds and foliage that surrounded her. Tate would bring her old school textbooks and help her learn, continued visiting and instructing her. She soon became very good at her paintings, started gathering foods that she would take to Jumpin's to sell. Jumpin was the owner of a gasoline, bait, and tackle shop. Because of the town folks making fun of her because of her clothing, Jumpin and his wife Mabel gathered clothing and shoes and began supplying Kaya with garments. Kaya continued to learn how to become even more resilient in her survival techniques and her harvesting foods, all the while continuing to paint pictures and gather shells. Her observations of how nature lived were also written down. Tate eventually graduated from high school and went away to college. He told Kaya he would be back, but did not come back to visit when he was home. Again, Kaya was alone and feeling abandoned by everyone. Another local boy by the name of Chase, who was the school football player, started approaching Kaya. At one point, he tried to rape her and she fought him off. She now understood the shame and physical pain her mother experienced on a regular basis. She stayed away from others for a while because she did not want them to see her bruises. Tate had encouraged Kaya to try to publish some of her drawings and writings, and she moved from being the local joke being called the Marsh Girl to the Marsh Experts, according to the publisher she acquired. She spent money fixing up the shack and continued living her life as she had. Years later, the football star Chase is found dead by a couple of boys from the nearby town, and after an investigation, Kaya was arrested for the murder. She was found not guilty. Tate returned to her side and promised not to leave her again. His work he had gained notoriety with brought him back to the Marsh area. They stayed together for many years. It was never determined who had murdered Chase, and it was considered an accident as a result of the investigation. Kaya also began writing poetry and had quite a bit of it published under a pseudonym, and even Tate did not know she was the person writing it. The day of Kaya's funeral, Tate discovered the secret that Kaya had been the local published poet, and one of her poems pointed to the cause of Chase's death. I feel this book shows an enormous amount of resilience on the part of one little girl who learned how to survive on her own in a very harsh environment. She was given the tools with which to learn and took it to earn a very respectful career, one which no one would have ever thought could happen from a Marsh girl. She lost her family, but through it all made lifelong friends who became her family. I think this is typical of most of us as we grow older and family starts to move away, and when it comes down to it, who knows us better? Not our family, but our friends. And who is there for us on a regular basis? Our friends. Take the time to pursue reading Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. Hopefully you will enjoy it as much as I did.